on the News Channel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. I'm Carrie Sharp. Glad to be back with you here in the new year. We appreciate you joining us tonight for Open Line. We are talking about what is happening with Iran right now. It's been the big story all week long as you have watched the news, and we have a wonderful guest to help walk us through it. Thomas Schwartz from Vanderbilt University, a history professor and also political science. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you're a regular here, so people will know your expertise. They will know your face. We appreciate you spending the next hour with us, and I do want to invite people to go ahead and call in. The number will be at the bottom of the screen, so just look for that. In the meantime, I'll ask the questions. And Professor, I wonder when really everything kind of stirred up, was it Friday or Saturday, and we got news that Soleimani had been killed. As a foreign policy expert, as a history professor, what was your initial reaction to that?
My first reaction was really surprise. This was a dramatic step.
Yeah.
I knew something of Soleimani, though, because both of friends who are working within the State Department and others who had told me about the important role that he played in the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and particularly in his role as a figure who had been so central to the Iranian expansion of their influence, particularly their role in Syria, their role in Lebanon and others. So I knew how significant he was. And so I was shocked to think that he had been taken out and in such a dramatic fashion by the United States directly. That certainly brought me into thinking that there will be reprisals or revenge of one sort or another, but I think it was a bold move to, as I think General Petraeus said, to reestablish deterrence, that Iran had gotten to the point, especially with the attack on the embassy in Iraq and others, to thinking that the United States would not respond. We had responded in a more minimal way in attacks on some of the bases, but this was a dramatic step, and I did in that sense think it poses both dangers and opportunities for the United States.
I was going to say, do you think it was necessary? And it sounds like in some ways the answer is yes.
Whether it was necessary or not, I think it was probably among a range of options the president had to try and reestablish deterrence. My own guess is that he was offered a range and he chose the most dramatic one, that this perhaps reflects his own anger at the idea that Soleimani had been responsible for the death of Americans. It may also reflect Donald Trump's hope that by some dramatic gesture he can cut the sort of Gordian knot that's keeping us in the Middle East and try and get a dramatic end. He doesn't want to stay there. This is something he's made clear, and he may be hoping to do that through a dramatic step and a dramatic action rather than what he saw as past presidents trying to do things with smaller steps.
Well, that brings up a good question then, because Iraq quickly said we are going to expel all U.S. troops after this move, and while the president has said over the years that's exactly what he wants. He wants U.S. troops out of there.
Right.
Then the response came this week, well, we want to be out, but not right this minute.
Not right this minute, yeah. No, and I think there's this hope that we could stay for a little bit longer, but I don't think it's against Donald Trump's ideas to get out. He would prefer to do it on our own terms, and he made some comments about how they'll have to pay us back for the air base and the rest. But I think in many respects, the action of killing Soleimani does fit into his larger hope to disentangle the United States, but to, in a way, go out like a gunslinger shooting as you're going out of the bar. In a way, going out forcefully, but in effect getting out. And this is, I think, something of what he's trying to do.
And you know, many have said over the years, the U.S. will never be out of the region if we want to keep any sort of stabilization over there. Right. Is it really possible to remove all of our troops?
I think the complication there that I think is going on is, of course, our close relationship with Israel. It used to be that there were three things. In the past, there was the Cold War and the concern about the Soviet Union. That's gone. Then there was the oil issue, and then Israel. Oil is no longer as significant because of the fracking boom and the degree to which the United States has attained a degree of energy independence. But our relationship with Israel is extraordinarily tight. It is supported by the majority of Americans. And so some presence in the region, in part, to at least be an assistant to Israel in the area, I think would be necessary. And the truth is that, of course, there are areas where we can stay which would be less controversial. For example, Kuwait. Kuwait wants us there because they're afraid of Iraq. They remember what happened. Saudi Arabia still wants us there, but that is a much more problematic relationship because of the behavior of that regime. Qatar hosts the fleet, and so there are countries that want the United States there. Iraq, in Syria, the presence of troops in Iraq and Syria has been largely because of ISIS. To the extent that the ISIS threat is minimized, it may be possible ultimately for the United States to withdraw.
It is open line. I want to jump to the phones. We have Terry on the line. Hi, Terry. Thanks for calling in tonight. You can go ahead.
Hello.
Hi there. Go ahead. You may want to turn down that TV in the background if you can.
Oh, there's not a TV on.
Oh, okay.
The real problem is, why didn't we arrest George Bush and Dick Cheney for starting this war? That's the real question.
All right.
Oh yeah, you can't hear me now.
No, we can hear you loud and clear. I don't know
okay.
if it's worth kind of going back through that fight.
Actually, ask the gentleman there about the petrodollar and how we are connected by the hip to the Saudis. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Terry. You know, I think that Terry brings up there is so much controversy for decades and decades. Not even just going back to President Bush.
Right.
Well before that with this region, and how we are so entangled. It is not a point A to point B kind of entanglement at all.
No, and it does have its roots back into the Cold War era. Also, World War II, Franklin Roosevelt met the Saudi king at the end of the Alta Conference and began a relationship. The United States developed ties. We are linked to the Saudis. Our oil companies did the oil exploration there. There was a time in the 1970s where the oil from that region kept the world economy going. Of course, there was the embargo, oil crisis here. So there have been these entanglements all along. The Iraq War, the decision by President Bush to go into Iraq, of course, which most Americans now regard as a mistake, of course, set a certain pattern as well. Yes, we've been entangled. These entanglements are there. There's plenty of blame to go around, I think, all the way through. But it's an ongoing issue.
I want to talk about the retaliation that we saw from Iran with their missile strikes that followed this week. I believe it was on Tuesday evening for us. Is that what you were expecting? Because they quickly promised there would be retaliation of an equal matter.
I'm not sure what to expect. I thought they might try to use proxy forces. General Soleimani was particularly close to and involved in the command of many of the forces he was leading that were in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Yemen, and other places in the region. And I thought that what they might do is try to use those forces against American forces there. Sending missiles against U.S. forces, that was a pretty dramatic step, but of course they also signaled it and allowed it not to have the effect.
Sure.
I mean, had they killed Americans, had they actually caused real significant casualties and damage, there would have been another retaliation. There would have been a step up. So in a way, the Iranians were trying to de-escalate. What is interesting, of course, is that they told their own people that they had killed 80 Americans. So they were, in a way, it's such a transparent, in a way, a very transparent attempt to placate the domestic audience while at the same time not leading up the escalatory ladder.
Is that kind of the MO?
It's fascinating. I don't know how seriously it can be held. I would imagine Iranians will find out that this did not happen. It could lead to some dissatisfaction. Iran the regime is totally committed to trying to stay in power and hold on to power. It doesn't want to. One of the reasons it seems to be very reluctant to admit that it might have shot down this plane is it doesn't want to appear weak or incompetent. There is a fear that any type of weakness will be exploited by opposition within the country. So their own stability and staying in power also is part of the reason for the propaganda and the deception.
And right now, I mean, just the events of today, and this has all been so fast moving with the Ukrainian plane going down. the Prime Minister of Canada saying, President Trump said it today, that it just looks like it was a colossal mess up. They screwed up.
But the thing is, just as in a way we've seen with the Soviet Union back in 1983 or in other regimes that are like this, there is this reluctance sometimes to admit fault because of a fear of what the consequences would be. In democratic states or in states that have a more open society, you can admit it. It has consequences, and governments sometimes try to hide it and try to make excuses, but the truth comes out. And in these types of regimes, it's a little bit harder.
Let's go back to the lines. Greg is on the line. Greg, thanks for being part of the show tonight. What's your comment?
This is I was wondering if there's been any questions if Solomon was actually on the airplane that got shut down going to Europe or to Canada to have a meeting or something. And I was also wondering, as far as I hate to get into religion or property type stuff, but he has like a relation to other men like Benedict, the former Pope, and let's say John Gotti and these other guys in the mob type persons and some other type people, the way they look. And I was wondering if he was doing something like that, maybe towards what you look at the Bible type shows and stuff, and I was just wondering about, is there anything about that he could have been on the airplane, not doing something secretly instead of, right there in the thing there.
All right, interesting. I'm not sure exactly all the ties there.
I'm not. I think it'll be interesting to see if one of the things that comes out of what happened with the plane is a set of conspiracy theories that might suggest who was on the plane, whether they were trying to target something. These types of theories often come out very quickly in terms of the conspiratorial feelings about what might be up to, what things might be up to in the Middle East, and it's fertile ground for that, and I'm sure there might be some of those issues coming to the fore.
All right, we already have to take a quick break. James, I know that you are on the line. We will get to you right after this. Stay where you are.